Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We will be getting started momentarily. I will give it another sort of 30 or 60 seconds for people to join, and then we will dive into today's content. Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, taking a look at identity first security for AI agents. Hugely important topic, a fast moving topic, and one which I think is really going to change the face of both productivity, security, compliance, and a whole host of different areas for the next decade or so, I would say. My name is Simon Moffatt. I'm founder analyst at the Cyber Hut. And before we sort of dive into some introductions and a bit of detail on today's topic, a couple of quick sort of housekeeping things to go through. First, obviously, we are on Zoom today, so everybody is centrally muted. But of course, we do have the Q&A functionality available and the chat functionality. So please do add in any questions and comments you may have, and we'll try and answer them in situ as we go. But we'll leave a sort of 5-6 minutes at the end to wrap up and cover off any final further questions we may have. And of course, today's session is being recorded as well, so you can obviously watch on demand, share with your friends and colleagues, and other. Um, AI is everywhere. Software used to be eating the world a decade or so ago, according to some VCs. Of course, maybe AI is now eating the world, or maybe AI is eating software. I don't know, but AI is everywhere. It's a huge thing. It's really changing just how we think about automation, productivity, and other things. And of course, a big part of that is AI agents, which is going to be the main focus of this webinar today. And before we dive into what this is going to be a really interesting set of topics here, I think start off with some introductions. We are real people. We aren't AI agents just yet. Maybe in a year or two we can run webinars with just agents. But my name is Simon Moffatt. I've been founder at Cyber Hut for about 5 years. I've been in the identity space nearly 25. I must say, I don't think there's been an innovation really as exciting as AI has been in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, and we've had some big ones over the past decade or so: mobile and cloud and passwordless, and even NHI, I guess, as well. The last 2 or 3 years, so thoroughly exciting to be in chat with Ido from Token Securities with me today. Ido, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you, Simon. I'm doing very, very well. Um, Starting off with a thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of the Cyber Hat. Uh, and I want to thank everyone that came today to listen to us, whether it's customers, other analysts, advisors, investors, and more. And if I may allow myself a bit of self humor, thank you for all of my competitors coming to listen to me talk about AI agents and tokens position in the market.
Oh, so more the merrier, right? It's get them all together. I mean, it's an exciting topic, though. It's an exciting area. I think talking really doing some interesting stuff in this space, which we'll hopefully uncover in the next 45 minutes or so. But I must say, we didn't synchronize this, but we both have the mustaches today, which is, I think that in itself is definitely a revolution of some sort. But I guess maybe a quick intro, maybe to yourself and to Token, for the audience. Obviously, I've known you for a year or two, I guess, but your sort of background and why the NHI slash agentic AI space and a
Yes.
bit backstory behind that, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. So Token is an identity security company founded in a very, very modern episode of the world, but I think that everybody that looks at innovation curves see how fast the world is changing. So when we started, to be honest, like most people didn't even use AI. That was pretty crazy times. It was only 2 years ago. But for me, I think the passion for identity security has always been there. To be honest, like most of my career spent in offensive cybersecurity as a very, very long military officer. But when I came out and went to the civilian world, first of all, I learned a lot of new angles to this world. One is that identity is the strongest place to be today. Like it's both the biggest enabler of everything that we do, or every tool, every service that we want to consume is owned by identity teams, and so that makes them the kings and queens of modern both security and productivity. And second, to be honest, I started Token because I really love what people are building around the world. I want, like, if I could, you said that AI is eating the world. I think it's watering the world. I think it's irrigating and like making it more fruitful, making our life so much easier and so much more fun and meaningful. I'm able today to learn everything that I want on it, like it's basically in my fingertips. And I think that as much as I can enable AI and be excited about it, help secure it, of course, because that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
That's a good goal for me. So
That's,
that's what I'm here for.
that's great. I love that AI watering the world. I love that. I'm going to steal that one. That's a really, I mean, this, of course, AI has huge disruptive properties. It is in
Yes.
productivity and all its huge benefits. But I think there's often currently a little bit of sort of trepidation around maybe it's going to take my job away, or perhaps it's going to be used maliciously on all these things. I think maybe some of that is true for the first maybe 2 3 years as we start to stabilize. But to me, it's very reminiscent of the Industrial Revolution. I'm not far from Manchester in the UK, which was the sort of world's first industrial city a few hundred years ago, and it just feels that level of change around how we do everything from shopping, productivity, delivering services and goods and everything else. I think if we get it right, which I think we're not far from, it has huge benefits. So, irrigation and watering the world, will definitely let's amplify that as a message. And so today's agenda, I guess, let's start off a little bit. A bit of a backstory, if like sort of level set a little bit around what is agentic AI, how does identity security play into this, and why is it different? Why do we need to talk about it specifically? And then sort of roll into the challenges, the technical challenges, the management challenges, the governance, the operations, etc. And then obviously the second half, talk about some solutions. How can we start to build a strategic way of securing our agents and really delivering the value that they do promise? But let's start off a little bit. Let's start off with a picture. Pictures are always useful, or Venn diagrams and others. And there's a few things I want to pull out on this a little bit. I think we definitely have learned, if you like, a lot from our people-based identity over the past sort of 2 decades. Identity started in the sort of employee space, looking at things like compliance and governance and others. That then expanded into the sort of B2C and citizen customer space, and that's sort of doing quite nicely as well as a sort of secondary industry. And then obviously we had this NHI workload stuff, which has been around for a long time, really emerged as an industry 2 or 3 years, I guess. And there's some huge differences in there between NHI and workload and people based. There's things like scale, there's things like the permissioning models. Obviously, in the human world, we talk about biometrics quite a lot for authentication. can't really do that for workloads. So we have to take the concept of either multi-factor or strong auth and look at how we can do that for NHIs and workloads. But I think agentics to me seems like it's another identity type. And is it the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds? It seems to be generating the scale and some of the credentialing issues of NHI, but then we also it's sort of representing people, isn't it? It's on behalf of. So is it the worst of both worlds or the best of what's your take here, Ido?
So you said something that really resonated with me a moment ago. You said AI is the new industrial revolution of the world. So let's say we didn't have industries, we would be very, very poor. We would be fighting for food or and whatnot. So everyone that's building AI are good people. They are doing their best to spread the word around. That doesn't mean that you can't have byproducts that are very, very bad for you. The same as the industrial revolution. So if I talk about the type of identities as I see them, human identity is something that's very, very role driven. You have a certain job description, a certain position in your company that you need access to, like a ton of different systems around your HR system, the CRM, the corporate knowledge base, your task driven systems that you are using, and it's a very small scale. You are one person. You are operating in the pace that you're operating is the how many clicks that can you do on the mouse or on the keyboard. And luckily for everyone, we were very smart as humanity to build a single source of truth a couple of years ago, about 25 years ago, to build like Active Directory and then amazing companies like Okta, um, and then the evolution to Entra ID and Jump Cloud Workspace and more, and to build that single source of truth. So that's human identity. Workload identity, on the contrast, is very, very different. It's very task driven. You have like in the workload, you have one task. You need to do this, like to run this automated script, to run this container, to run this cluster. And the scale, in contrast to people, it scales with code. As many resources, like in the age of infrastructure as a service, as many resources as you want, you can just make a request and get them back. So it scales a lot. And non-human identity or workload identities have been very, very much decentralized. By the way, I want to say like non-human identity is the overarching area that we're working on. Agentic identity and workload identity are parts of it.
Mhm.
Now, agent identity is the combination, and I'm sad to say that in terms of security it's the worst of both worlds. So it means that an agent should maximize for flexibility. It should be hyper connected to the organization system. For example, if you want an agent to help with productivity tasks, you need to allow it access to everything that you do in order to make things faster. So it maximizes flexibility, it's hyper connected, but it's still built on an AGI, meaning that the decentralization, the overprivilege, the archaic authentication mechanisms, all of the things that an AGI suffers from, or workload identity suffers from, agent would suffer from as well, because the underlying technology is the same.
Mhm.
So that's a bit how I see the combination between agents and NHI, human identity, and more.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. I think there's some real insight there. Hyperconnectivity. That's something which we often take for granted. Is people. We have lots of touch points in our sort of business role, if you like. We have a job title, but we have lots of dotted lines and lots of project work, tasks, data we need that spreads way far beyond this. I think it's a real problem in the human world. It's an even more complex problem, I think, in the sort of more digital world. And you also mentioned that decentralized nature as well, the distributed way of working. And I think, identity has some real sort of tendencies to be centralized for management, but then the enforcement and usage is really working towards a distributed model, which I think also brings some interesting problems. And you also mentioned the source of truth. In the human space, we've very much conditioned around having this source of truth, human resources, PeopleSoft, SAP, or whatever, and that then filters down through a connector and auto magically provisions into these downstream systems. First of all, that never happens. Just to shoot that myth. Sorry, audience, but the number of connected systems is often much smaller than those under management, and the provisioning aspect is often ineffective anyway. So there's a lot of stuff in the human world which we haven't fixed, and then we then have the workload and now agentic. So there's, to me, there's a bit of a myriad of issues. I think there's some huge lessons we can learn from the human stuff, but the minute I'm a little bit inclined to agree with the sort of worst of everything, in the sense of the complexity of complex behaviors and permissions, the scaling of NHI and workload without the auth source, and then somehow you've got to manage all that together. A
Yeah.
couple of other things. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think that if I it would even be just not opinionated at all, I would just point out the facts, like the identities that agents use are very, very much ephemeral.
Mm,
They suffer from like challenges like ownership. It's very unclear who owns them, who has them, and the interdependencies between agents and systems is super unclear. How has like three to 30 different API calls in 20 systems are all connected to the same agent that just trying to send a marketing email to my prospect is something that's very, very, very hard to correlate without a central IDP. So it's not even bad, good or bad. It's just like the fact of how this system operates today.
yeah, exactly right. I think there's definitely there's new concepts to understand, and then there's the underlying technology to manage that as well, which I think is introduces some things. There's a couple of things I just want to put out on here as well, around things being data first, which really is a lot of the. If you look at AI in general, it needs to be fed data, source data, whether it's a RAG system or a large language model or whatever. So it's typically driven by a data first design pattern, data first world, which is absolutely perfectly legitimate. But that often means security and internal identity aren't necessarily first class citizens, if you like. A little bit like this sort of CIA triad we have around confidentiality, integrity, etc. It's often data first and get the data mechanics working, and then we'll think about things like confidentiality or things afterwards, which I think is potentially a little bit of a limitation. And just to amplify this focus on agency, about being goal orientated as well. So workloads perhaps or service accounts maybe doing one thing between two endpoints or two APIs or two different systems. It's quite a well known piece of automation, if you like, a piece of process where this thing is going to talk to that thing. The behaviors, the potential network payload and the credentials being used, and it's sort of backwards and forwards, like a bit of a sort of pub sub model. But obviously in this agent world, it's goal orientated, isn't it? So again, that for us as humans, that's okay. We're complex human beings, but I think to replicate that digitally is it's a very different thing, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I think that identity today is so it provokes so much curiosity of how it will go because everything you say is true. But to be honest, it was also true before identity providers exist. If you think about it, when we started after everything that happened with the Enron scandal and like going very, very back to when we started identity, we wanted everybody to access data. We want them to be goal oriented to perform their task. And we wanted like the decision making to be like, how can I allow this human to do as best as they can? We went full circle. And now for agents, we are not innovating quickly enough to solve this.
Mm,
Like we need an identity provider for agents that allows flexibility, have segregation of duty, have governance administration process, allows building the new agentic workforce for organizations. I think that there's so much interesting things going on in that space. Just one of the examples that I like the most is cost saving agents. So everybody is about financial efficiency today because the world has changed since 2023. And I like someone told me I worry that I'm giving so much permissions to agents that my cost saving agent would come and say, so this cloud environment is so expensive. Let's just delete some of the data.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
would save some of the cost. And that's like, that there's so much to do there. There's so many things that we need to reinvent. I, I believe that companies like Token and everything working in this space, our main goal is to make it like right again and build this new like identity management process for agents.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard similar stories about what you described there and the sort of optimization one. And I was at the Gartner conference recently, and the example was around the agent was essentially reading data from a SQL database, and it was obviously self-optimizing, and it had been goal orientated to optimize the querying and optimizing what it's. So it had the ability to alter the database, and it did. It removed the data which it didn't need because as an optimization it was going to make its queries faster. So we have to, as humans, obviously we would never do that, of course, but we have to be very careful, I think, around, I guess, the goals we give agents, but also very similar to the questions we ask things like large language models and other. You have to be careful how you prompt and how you wrap those questions and how you wrap the goaling around. So it definitely is. It is altering the goal orientation, decision making. I think my worry, just to sort of amplify what you said there, is identity becomes the limiting factor for this technology because it's racing ahead. And I think if the IAM aspects, the governance, authentication, authority, etc., becomes the limiting factor, they'll get circumvented, and the models will get deployed anyway, just without the necessary sort of controls in there. So that is my major concern. So we're still working on human. We still haven't quite got that right. NHI is better defined, I think, than it certainly was maybe 2 years ago. I think agentic AI is definitely the best and worst of both. I think that in turn, it is then bringing us, it is bringing new challenges. I think any new sort of technology change will. I think it's important to understand both the sort of management and technical sides of that. And I want to sort of pre sort of prefix this a little bit and just pull in some of the human things that we all know and love. And identity for human is it's complicated, it's big, it's broad, and it's important to think about the sort of life cycle, if you like, of the identity itself. And clearly we have things like identity verification and validation, sort of IDV proofing there. We've got directory services, which have been around sort of 25 years, that provisioning stuff that goes from authoritative source downstream, IGA, which still is being invested upon in its millions and still often ends in distress. You've got things like PAM, you've got credential management sessions, etc., etc. So you've got all of this end-to-end capabilities. Clearly, that world, the Oktas and others, doing the IDP stuff and authorization, it isn't for this world we're talking about currently, but some of those concepts can be well used. Of course, my concern, part of my job as an analyst, writing maturity guides and helping the buyer side understand, is that a lot of this human stuff still isn't done. It still isn't completed. Organizations still struggle with orphan accounts, with ghost accounts, excessive permissions. They don't roll out MFA because it's complicated and it's expensive. So I guess my concern is we've got this end-to-end model of different technologies for people. We still haven't got that right. We need to do this for agents. No, to me, in my mind, we need to take some of those concepts, proofing, authoritative source that you mentioned, and others, and how can we start to deliver this for the sort of agentic world? So there's some challenges in here. I'm not going to necessarily go through every single one, but I guess the first sort of stuff for me is if I was sort of sketching this out, if I was an alien thinking, right, where do I start from here? Um, the first one is, what do they look like? And that's a strange question, but by that I mean, I guess coming from your sort of NHI experience there, not all NHIs are the same, are they? You need to be able to view them all. I think first of all, you need to be able to scan, discover, understand. Is that a fair thing? Because there's a lot of, to me, there seems to be a lot of shadow AI in general. So we need to be able to find them, I guess. Is that the first starting point, do you think?
Yeah, I think that an agent's inventory is something that's so useful for so many organizations. So I gave a talk about 3 months ago in one of the identity conferences in Vegas, which is not a place that I'm too fond of, but something that yeah, sorry, and something that they ask you like, what's the approach to like to securing AI agents? We need to lock them down, and I'm like, you don't need to lock them down, my friend. Like I think that like what you need to do is to be the most excited person about agents in your uh, organization. Now you can't be excited about something that you don't know that happens. So if you weren't invited to the party, because everybody wants to adopt their own agents, whether it's coding agents, productivity, sales, tech, IT, DevOps, and more, you need to have some kind of a discovery mechanisms that would pull them all together from all around your environment, like traceability, visibility, and observability are super, super important at this stage. By the way, not to stop or to slow down the AI adoption, but also to not waste resources on trying to to replicate all across the organization. We see organizations with tens of thousands of employees just
Mm,
replicating the work across departments without them even knowing that another department already built that agent. So discovery is super important for both efficiency and security, of course.
yeah, I think that's vastly important. I think is you need to know what you have before you can then start understanding the sort of risk model and the threat model as part of that. And I think that the sort of secondary bit to that, which I think is I'm really quite passionate about, is the ownership of this stuff. And I think if you talk about identity in general, people-based identities having being owned, or an account being owned by an identity, which is then I guess authoritative through an HR source or whatever, in that NHI API credential space, you also need to link APIs and keys and credentials and other to a physical person, or maybe a team at best, perhaps, maybe sort of spread it out that way. But to me, who should own? Do they need owners? It seems to me they do, but I don't want to lead your
Yeah.
voice there. What do you think?
Um, it's inevitable because eventually you need some accountability, and that ownership is very interesting how it evolves in the organization. I think that we'll talk about it later on, but there are like three stages of AI evolution in organizations where the first stage that we always see, like in every customer that we have, are automated workflows,
Mhm.
meaning people using their own human identity, owning an agent that works underneath them. I really like coding agents are, I think, in that way, the most advanced. They give you a little signature at the end of each commit that you do, like written by Cloud Code, right? So that's my software development agent wrote this. I'm owning it, and it's under my um, running under my human identity. So I'm the owner. Second part is collaborative agents that we build together. We want to have another teammate uh,
Mm.
in our support staff or in our HR department. So we build an autonomous agent, and basically the first part is workflow. The second part is like calling it an agent, meaning that that's like a pseudo person that is carrying out tests for customers or for internal personnel, doing analysis, research, automation, and more. And that ownership, by the way, that's the hardest because does it sit in operations? Does it
Yeah,
sit in the development body? That's hard to characterize. And there is the very, very far agentic future that is like, entire departments, companies, or different agents talking to each other, which is like multi-agent environment, which is something that I have to say is like too early for me to answer of who should own them. I hope that someone will build them. I want to see a company operating that way. And then I'll know to talk about their identity management practices. But that would be, I think, the most interesting part because agents collaborating with agents, like that ownership model is absolutely
yeah.
insane to me, and I'm waiting to see it happen.
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit like Robot Wars, isn't it? It is the accountability is the key thing, isn't it? Around, if you created this thing, what's it going to do? How have you goaled it, if you like? What goals have you given it? Are you aware of its reach and of its capabilities? And as you say, if it then perhaps interacts as part of a mesh or part of a multi sort of agent architecture, what does that look like with things like compound and cascading access? Which in turn can be a compounded and a bigger blast radius if something goes wrong. And I think that is a little bit concerning for me as well. Um, a couple of practical ones here around things like authentication. It always intrigues me. We do some polls at the Cyberhut around, should you have MFA for people? And everyone's like, yes. And you say, well, okay, should we have MFA for workloads, NHIs? And everyone goes, yes. And you go, well, okay, what does that look like? Because obviously, most sort of NHI workload stuff, totally generalizing here, but it's often possession based authentication, maybe certificate based or other. What's your sort of view just on strong authentication in that space? Is things like possession stuff enough? Do you want to look at things like behaviors in there as well, or sort of process attestation? Does it matter in this new world?
Yeah, authentication is the most challenging part of in terms of security. Like I think that eventually credentials falling into the wrong hands is like the number one source of data breaches across many, many, many years already. But if you look at authentication, it serves a lot of different purposes.
Hmm.
Like for example, when I as a human want to change change my permissions or do any risky behavior, basically, I'm challenged with this like myriad of different authentication factors that I need to go through. And then when an agent does it, it's called a feature. And when an agent does it without any additional factors of authentication, it's called like a very, very streamlined behavior. And that's very interesting part. Like agents are unexpectable. It's very, very hard to assess what the next thing that they will do. Like a minor misclassification in access by an agent can compound over time, eventually granting like unauthorized users admin level permissions. And that's a very, very interesting part because everything about segregation of duties or a human in the loop is tied back, in my opinion, eventually to authentication. And I do think that your agent needs an identity, and that identity should be very, very well and very modernly authenticated.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And you're right. You're right. It generates a slightly different way of thinking about it. The other counterpoint, though, I will add in here, of course, is obviously with humans and authentication, we often have multiple different, I guess, vulnerabilities around things like authentication fatigue, push fatigue. Your mobile gets blasted with push notifications, for example, and you just accept them without really understanding the context. Of course, things like agents, workloads, they don't get tired. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm
Yeah,
maybe I'm
you
maybe I'm
never know.
assuming they don't have personalities and things. Maybe they do underneath, perhaps in the future. But we can do things differently. We can do step up. We can introduce repetition and things like this. And usability isn't really a thing to some extent, so you can do things differently, I think, in there as well. Um, well, last one we'll quickly add on here, the challenge is monitoring, isn't it? I think, we talk about human behavior and it's very nuanced, it's complicated, it's difficult. We have to analyze our own behavior if we're sort of doing that salami attack and sort of changing a little bit over a longer period of time. Maybe compare me to my peers and my colleagues to see what they're up to. It seems to me we need to have some sort of monitoring in this space as well. Is that just a bit of a no-brainer?
Yeah, no, auditability is very, very hard. I think that like if for workload identities it's hard and they are very, very repetitive. For agents, it's much harder because auditability is also, in a way, your ability to trace back and to understand the agent's operation. So an agent has a lot of autonomy. That's the basic idea behind it, is like that you would prompt it with natural language to do anything that you think it should be doing. And it goes very, very, very different ways. And those different ways, you have to have some kind of trace a record and a ledger of the actions, eventually also to make it better for your internal needs, but also to have some kind of accountability and like explanation of what happened.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, monitoring is a big challenge.
I agree. It's, again, it is back to that accountability, isn't it? You know, what's happened? Can it be traced? Can it go back to some sort of root point of either a person or instruction or something, which then has that full sort of tracing of what has happened. So I guess so far we've sort of probably painted a bleak picture. Really, you started off with the positivity of AI sort of watering the world, which I think is great. We've created a few problems here around the challenges and how difficult it is, but I do think we are very close to fixing a lot of this stuff. I think taking some of the concepts we've taken from the human world, the NHI world, adding those together and really coming out with a really good maturity model here. And I guess now I've been reading the sort of token AI security guide. There's a link to that at the end of this webinar actually. So token and others and the community. It's not just token, is it? There's token, there's Dscope, another vendor in there, and a whole host of other sort of industry practitioners put together an AI security guide, which is really looking at some of the key issues, the key levels of maturity around managing AI in general, which I think is a really fabulous community resource. And I think based on our research at the side put, there's some real basic building blocks, I think, ultimately around how organizations need to consider this. I think first of all, it is you need to discover stuff. You need to understand your landscape. And I think absolutely today the enterprise is probably struggling with shadow systems. Shadow IT has been around for a long time. Shadow AI in general, subscription models, great to get started, but obviously your data and functionality is in somebody else's cloud potentially, which introduces a whole host of sort of perimeter issues there as well. But I think really more strategically, it is discovery around the ecosystem that you have, whether it's SaaS or your own sort of on-prem AI or managed AI. You need to understand what you have, the identities, the accounts, the credentials. Is that area that to me seems to be just an area which is going to be, I think it's relatively mature, but it seems to be getting deeper, isn't it, around what we are looking to try and discover. Is that fair?
Yeah. So it's fair, but it's also a bit unfair. I'm going to say somewhere something a bit provocative, but all AI agents are accessing organizational data through identities that we already know of, whether it's
Okay.
a human identity or an NNHI.
Okay.
There are split between elements. There's like SaaS applications where you see more of the custom GPTs, MCP servers, and so on and so forth, like accessing. And there's the homegrown agent that we're building that do customer support and data analysis and service and marketing and sales and so on. But all of these are something that we're already building as part of like tokens solution. So I think that what we took as an agenda for ourselves is to try to challenge ourselves in terms of research and understanding and product and so on. How do we discover these underneath the data that we're already collecting? Should I go through a bit about like how do we approach that?
Please, yeah, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, awesome. So when we started, when like the thing like or agents became questions from our customers of like how do I discover them, where are they, and so on. We said first of all of the material is in our hands. Like we know where we should be looking in. Like you need to first of all catalog the inputs that you want to take in. Need to catalog your audit logs, your identity repositories, the code that your developers are using, your CI/CD tool chains, the SDK that they are implementing, the runtime telemetry and logs that you are saving, and all of that is something that when we started talking about workload identities, it's something that we started doing because workload identities live in the SDLC. They don't live in the process of a person joining the company. So we started analyzing or creating the catalog of inputs that we want to analyze, and then we built like this book of techniques. Some of it, by the way, as you said, is accessible through the secure AI adoption guide that we put out. of how do we analyze which patterns are we looking for in terms of naming conventions? How do we do static scanning of libraries to analyze and to identify LLM usage? How do we analyze a huge volume of logs to see access to services like Bedrocks and Vertex and Azure OpenAI Studio and so on? And also, we started incorporating that in the work that we are doing with identity teams that we are working with. We asked we ask human intelligence question of like, how do you know who opened an email address that is related to an agent? I think that even these basic discovery questions is something um, that companies don't have in hand. And then we were flooded with evidence from all around the organization. We had like both our raw material and our coverage scope, which is very wide. We had the right techniques to flow them all. And we started building this correlation and prioritization and risk context process that helps us identify the most important agents, those agents that are linked to the crown jewels of the organizations. And on the other hand, how do we tie them back to human ownership? And together we made this lightweight framework of risk scoring that says, do I have any red flags in agent usage? Because as I said, I'm an advocate mainly for like positive AI adoption, but also there are sometimes red flags like overly permissive GPTs or
Mm.
agents that are on the path of privilege escalation capabilities or orphaned agents that were started and then the owner left the organization and so on and so forth. So those are like the red flags that we created that lightweight framework to prioritize.
Mm. Mhm.
So it's basically taking and cataloging the inputs, understanding the techniques to investigate them, and then prioritizing what you found to really focus on the things that mattered for you in terms of security.
That's the key. That's a fascinating approach, a really detailed approach. And again, it sort of then sits into that analysis bucket around the more information you have, the more informed you are, the better and more streamlined you can make your prioritization. And it's often the case of prioritization. It's a difficult thing to do. You know, you don't want more alerts, you don't want more things to manage, you don't want more risk, but you want informed decision making. And I think the more information you have around the landscape and everything from the identity to the SDK and more and usage, you can then the analysis part becomes a lot easier because you can compare, you can assign owners, you can sort of maybe guess owners based on behavior or based on usage. So you can start saying, well, we found this stuff. We think it looks similar to this other stuff. Are you the owner? Did you start the process? You own the CID/CD pipeline. Is it part of your sort of delivery mechanism there? So I think the analysis part is often quite difficult. But I think the more information you have, you can then start to sort of prioritize sort of rapidly. And I guess ultimately, we want to try and protect some stuff, don't we? That's the reason for deploying the identity world is to try and protect some of the things that we have. And there's some things in there which, again, I guess from the sort of stealing from the human world, we need to be making sure we've got some sort of strong auth in place. But the permissioning, even on the human world, we've not got right. In honesty, we have over permissioning. We still have role-based access control, often in distress, loads of role explosion and stuff like that. Then we have ABAC, then we have PBAC, and then we have relationship-based access, all trying to fix similar problems, and they're all often struggling. It is about right sizing, isn't it? Right sizing permissions, and it's. I think this is quite a. I think A, it's complex. B, it's still probably quite early in this world. But what's your sort of thoughts there on permissioning for sort of agents and other? Is it an easy thing? Is it worse than people? Is it easier? What's your sort of comment on that one?
I think it's pretty challenging when it so first of all I want to say we built this like this we talked about these AI security guides that talks about maturity models and how AI is evolving in enterprises. So you would be able to find the different stages. Now, right sizing, it's pretty easy when we are talking about AI workflows where an agent is connected to your human identity, which is already pretty provisioned and managed pretty well. I know that some people don't feel that way, but I started a non-human identity company for a reason, in my opinion, and that reason is that there are bigger fish to fry. When you move to like autonomous agents that work in your production environment, that's where the right sizing gets very, very funky because when you have workloads like Kubernetes clusters, containers, Lambda functions, EC2 instances, or whatnot, it's very easy after, I could say if I'm being very exaggerative, after 20 minutes, you know what the permissions that machine is using. But give it 90 days, okay? Give
Mhm.
90 days to that workload to create their own baseline of permissions. You would know very, very good like what's the fit. You might miss one or two, that's a bummer, but you would know basically what's the big fit here and what permissions your workload is. When you have an agent, it does everything, and every customer uses it differently. It operates basically, even two people asking the agent the same question could end up in different workflows, different query, different ways that the agent has operated just because the prompt was different. And so right sizing, there it's more of like rebuilding role-based access control for agent. Like you need to say what are your boundaries because the same as you don't know what a person will do when they come to work, like whether they will start with A, move to B, and then to C, or will they start with C and then go to A and then to B?
Yeah.
You need to just explain very well what's the agent role and to make sure that that role is well defined and implemented in your role-based access control in your production environment, which is not somewhere we are very used to manage identities in.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I just jotted down there just as you were talking. I think there's often a bit of a disconnect, isn't there, between the goal that's being given and the permissions needed. And by that, I mean the goal that the agent has been set could be successful. You know, they could do everything they've been asked to do. It's successful. It's on time. It's whatever the agent is tasked with. But the permissions around it could well be just they could have admin rights, of course. So they've done the right thing. They've optimized and delivered the goal, but the permissioning um, could be totally off key there. Of course,
Oh,
it is very important to try and sort of collapse it without impacting the goal, of course, which is
you
counter.
made me think another about another angle, which is one very very short one. I just want to shout out one of our best partners, which is Disco, which
Okay.
built the secure AI adoption together with us, because I think that agents access with role-based access control is much easier when you correlate workload identity and customer identity. That
Okay.
creates a
Yeah.
very, very, very well-defined boundary where you can operate. So we were very happy to build this guide together, and I think that like collaboration between identity companies in general is a blessing in the world that we're living in today.
I 100% agree. And I think there's a lot to be learned. I mean, they are very different ecosystems, of course, but there's lots to be learned from B2C to B2E to NHI and workload. I think there's lots of complementary stuff there, concepts, knowledge, behaviors, patterns, and I think ultimately, as you say, AI is going to be empowering both the B2E and the B2C world. I think that's a quite a powerful community that is being built there. So. We're kicking on a little bit, about sort of 10 minutes to go. I want to sort of finish up a little bit about where to go, how to get started. Now, this stuff is fast moving. In 6, 12 months' time, the next RSA or the next Blackout conference, we'll be probably talking about some slightly sort of next gen problems here. But I think it's important to take away and make some important steps in understanding this. And there's a few things I sort of pull out and I sort of pull in your experience on the AI security guide here. But you need to understand what you have, don't you? You know, whatever that landscape looks like, and that to me, it isn't just the bits and the bytes and the technical bit. It's understanding where the business is heading. You know, where is AI being used? Why is it being used? Where's the value? What metrics of success are being put in place? What are the goals that are being set? Who is setting the goals, etc. So there's a lot of mechanics around the business there, and that to me, it is that cross department stuff, isn't it? It isn't just the IT or the CIO or whatever looking at some bits and bolts. It is involving, maybe even legal as well around data usage, compliance, data scientists, of course, and other. But I guess the ownership one is a big one, isn't it? Around it is that accountability and the governance of this. You know, sort of mentioned, or I mentioned the sort of industrial revolution stuff. is it going to need a different sort of governance model, or can we just leverage what we already have? Do you think?
I think that it depends on the level of much of AI adoption maturity that you have in your organization.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
organization starts from like ad hoc adoption, they move to enable AI enablement and integration. Then I think that like I would call it phase three. They operationalize AI, they create infrastructure, and then that's the part where you need governance. Right now, you need a little bit less governance and a
Mm.
bit more like to go let the plants go. But I think that when you start to operationalize it and it starts to grab real roots in the organization, then you need the governance process to manage that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's definitely fair. And the sort of last one I want to sort of pull out there is it is that sort of depth of capabilities versus that breadth of coverage. Obviously, you mentioned earlier about the sort of the discovery aspect there. You need to understand what you have within your ecosystem. Not all AI deployments will be the same. Not all agents will be the same. Not all AI systems will use AI agents, for example. So there's definitely a level of coverage there around, what does your existing ecosystem look like. But I think as part of that, it's this stuff's going to change. So you need to be able to discover those changes as you deploy more technology, as your AI agents do you get right sized permissions, and you start to then say, okay, this concept we use for permissioning, for example, it worked on this model. We're just going to go and copy and paste it or use the same things elsewhere. I don't think that is often going to be the case. So I think there's definitely, again, always be sort of scanning, discovering breadth of what you have around the depth of features and capabilities that may be needed. It is going to make huge change, isn't it, to both the sort of productivity and the security side of the organization. I guess one question I sort of pull in, I mentioned the sort of cross department bits there. What sort of departments or areas have you seen sort of the biggest interest? Is it the security areas, or is it more like SecOps and DevOps who are building stuff, or what's just anecdotally your sort of flavor there? Do you think?
In terms of like capabilities to monitor and manage identities for agents,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So the interesting thing, first of all, is that it's like two organizations are working in parallel. One, security, like security is the one of the only organizations in every company that we work with that needs to innovate with the speed of technology.
Mm,
Especially like when you adopt things so quickly, they need to move so rapidly into that and they're thrown into the water. So it's both the CISOs, the GRC, which like holds a lot of responsibility to understand and to analyze and to have a real honest conversation with the auditors, and then it reaches usually the identity team to mainly in an enablement fashion. And the other hand is that organizations are like like democratizing AI. They're adopting it, like jumping in, and then the leaders, the IT leaders, the engineering leaders, the DevOps and operation leaders, they want to give the good products to their people. They don't want each person to use a different model, to use a different technology for consumption and so on. They want efficiency and they want that the best tool would be in the hands of their people. And they are also very much asking for discovery and for visibility into that area to understand like who's doing what.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. That's a fabulous answer. Fabulous answer. Well, we're coming to the end of our sort of hour here together, and I guess sort of wrap up a little bit with a bit of Q&A. I think there's one or two questions coming. I think one or two I missed from earlier, actually, unfortunately. I'll try and catch up with those now. Tommy, an interesting question from an anonymous attendee earlier on. I think we're talking about the impact of AI. So it was basically the question was about AI or cyber, which has the most demand in the coming decades. I guess I want to change that question a little bit to the from the anonymous attendee. I'm going to ask a slightly different question and start saying, eh, will we need to have like a separate security team for AI? Do you think, or will AI just become yet another service that we consume within the enterprise? What's your view there? Will security of the CISO just consume AI, or will it be AI cyber team that would be slightly different?
Wow, that's a great question. Nobody's asked that for me until this point. I'm thinking there's going to be new companies. So
Mhm.
of course there's going to be new departments. Like companies are changing. Whales are like sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and the fast swimmers are like, the first one to go to the to success. So like I think that of course there's going to be new dedicated people that are doing this. Even if we think about it the same, about workload security, about network security, about identity and more, of course, that there is a part that would be kept human and part that would be AI. So I think that there's going to be a big split, and we don't understand it yet.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great answer. Philosophical answer. I guess I put a pithy quote on LinkedIn a few months ago around it is AI the only thing that can secure AI, which sort of creates it's sort of part of security, but maybe the only thing that can secure it is AI itself, or maybe a separate AI
No,
model. So it's
yeah,
AI wars, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know
not
about that.
to hurt not to hurt the feelings of any advocates of AGI, the artificial general intelligence. Like AI is very, very focused on
Yeah,
on
yeah,
things. Like it's good for some things. It can't replace you as a person.
no.
Especially the smart people here in the crowd. I believe that you have good job security. Don't worry. AI is not going to replace you tomorrow, and the AI needs you to protect it.
Yeah, it's
So I do think that AI is part of securing AI, but the people will make it happen.
okay, that's good. That's good. Human in the loop. I think that's what we need.
Yes,
Humans in the
yes,
loop is
yes.
definitely there. I think this is where we sit. Back all sorts of automation. Really, having entirely automated things often results in quite fragile systems. Anyway, I know AI isn't just automation, but I think having human in the loop, certainly for governance, certainly for being able to respond and remediate to things, is definitely the best one. So, I think there's one. I had one quick question around differences between sort of workloads and NHI. I'll abridge the question a little bit, Rohit. So apologies for this, but I will say, is NHI a subset or a superset of workloads? And what about machine identity? Is that more, bigger, or less, or worse, or different?
Yeah.
Wo-
So I think that you know a little bit about my opinion about semantics and taxonomy here, but NHI is the overarching term for everything modern in identity right now, and I think that it's a superset of agentic AI identities. It's a superset of workload identities. It's the integrations that tie services together in the internet. Basically, NHI is that type of identity that you didn't know that's running the internet, and that hygienic identity is a part of it. So that's my take on naming conventions. To be honest, most customers don't care about those naming
Indeed.
conventions. They want their problem solved, and that's what I'm here for. But I want to be, I want to answer the question, so I think that NHI is a superset of all of these things.
Good answer, diplomatic answer. I personally, as an analyst, I'm actually agnostic on this. I'm with you. I want to talk about the problem rather than the
Yes.
definitions itself. That's more interesting. Ido, absolutely fabulous chatting as always. Learned some wonderful tips and insights there. I guess as we wrap up, a couple of calls to actions. Cyberhook, we've got a free cheat sheet on agentic and MCP security as well. It's worth just checking out. Just again, terms, concepts, just to get a bit of background as to some of that detail in there. And I also want to sort of shout out your AI security guy. I think that's a really good community contribution. And there's lots of practitioners now, so CISOs and people who are lifting the rocks within industry, doing the heavy lifting, making some of this stuff work, which I think is vitally important. But Ido, any quick last minute thoughts before we wrap up today?
Um, just a good word for the innovators there that want to adopt AI and want to make it as most successful as possible for the organization. I know that it's hard coming from the security head, but we are here to help you. And thank you for listening to both Simon and myself.
Perfect. Wonderful way to end up. Ido, thank you for sharing your insights, your experience. I know you've been working on this stuff for a long time and you are sort of living this 24/7 and listening to the use cases and continually adopting and delivering capabilities in this space, it's a fascinating area. I think that there's a huge amount of benefits for AI. I think getting it right is going to be absolutely fantastic. I think having an identity first design pattern and set of capabilities will allow organizations to get there. So thank you for sharing a bit of time. Thank you for everyone for watching. Of course, you will receive copies of the video and some links afterwards as well. But thank you for participating, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.